So on that note, what I'm going to do is I'm going to introduce our panel, and then we're going to set out the seats and start our discussion. So if I could have the slide with the names of the panel. So obviously you know me. We have Tabi-Haller Jorden, who is the president and CEO of the Paradigm Forum, ex-CEO of Catalyst. So she has deep expertise. She's a firm believer in innovation and is going to share with us how we can embrace it. Michèle Paque is the head of VP of West Europe at Quintiles. And she is actually very active in introducing gender balance into her organization. And she was, when were you the winner of the Women at Work? 2015 Women at Work Awards, so she's also been a winner. Katrien Goossens is the head of Global Diversity and Wellbeing for Euroclear. Katrien is passionate about unconscious bias, so any questions on unconscious bias, you've got her here to ask her, and also wellness in the workplace. We've got Paul Dewandre, who is author and a comedian, who has a one-man show and trainings on Men are from Mars, Women are from Venus, and how the difference is, and how we can manage it, and how we can benefit, and how we need to be moving towards gender bilingualism. And finally, we have Chiara Tomasi, and she is in public policy in Google. So that's really, really interesting, because they're an organization which are really doing everything right. But even doing it right, it's not going fast enough. And she's also on our panel in a reverse way as our millennial mentor, if you like, to come at all the older people with fresh eyes. So we'll just give everybody a couple of seconds to set up, and then I'll invite everybody to the floor. Should we bring them closer? Yeah. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, would you like to come? You can just put me on the side so I can, everybody take a seat. And I want to be more to the side. Okay, well, the first thing I thought we would do is I would ask them all to just start off by sharing their hidden secret, the thing that no one knows about them, and then to answer this one question. And the first question is, what do you think is the most significant element of disruption that you're experiencing or observing currently? Chiara, have you got a mic? Yeah,
yes.
Great.
Well, hi, everyone. Thank you for electing me the spokesperson for millennials. I'm happy I'm wearing these shoes because I guess they give a bit of a millennial vibe. So great to be here. I'd say my hidden secret is that this is the first time I'm ever on a panel. So please be kind with me. And thank you. Actually, I decided to get on this panel as an 8th of March resolution. I was talking to some colleagues and we were discussing women on panel and how there's not enough of them. And we decided, all right, this year, the three of us will be on a panel before summer. So that's my way of making that happen. I encourage every one of you to try. It's very scary, but it's fun. As for disruption, I have the chance of working for a company that is very disruptive. It's not always fun because it scares a lot of people. But I see disruption happen, and I think artificial intelligence would be the thing that I see as the most disruptive in the discussion that we're having on the role of women in society. And it's not necessarily for the impact on jobs, but taking one step ahead of that, right now there's people building artificial intelligence. Those people are 25-year-old dudes, all white in California. And nothing against them, they're great people. But they are the ones setting up the rules of AI. And AI learns, machine learn from reality. They take on the bias that they see in reality. So if the group of people building it is predominantly men and predominantly white young men, that bias will definitely end up in the whole infrastructure that we'll end up with in the future.
Okay, Michèle, you go.
Thank you.
Your secret.
My secret, I'm coming from the field and a small village, and my secret is that I like to go. And when I've got some time, I'm going with my boots. I'm going really back to the village. And you have also to know that I've got a lot of cows at home, even if I'm living here in a city. It's not a true cow, but that's picture of this, some painting that I've got. All right, so regarding the disruptive in my job, I would say the word is going VUCA, and you probably know what VUCA means, so volatile, and but with a lot of ambiguity now. It's coming from not only from inside, as indeed we've got some merger, we've got new people, and we have to see how we have to work together. It's coming from the customers who are also moving and thinking differently than in past. And the third dimension is probably coming from economics. And if we see the new leaders now, and you mentioned some of them, coming from US, coming from Turkey, or we've got, or even from Russia, we've got sometimes...
UK.
And UK too, yes. So I have to see that in my job, I see my leaders slightly changing. I'm working for a US company, and the headquarters is in UK. What I see is that sometimes they feel that they are allowed now to speak differently than what they did in past. And I think this is something where we should be aware to see how we want to move forwards with all of us moving for a growing business, but all together.
Okay, Tabi?
Terrific. I know. I was thinking of Henry.
Your
Delighted
secret?
to be here. My name, which I often says comes with a mileage program, is Eleanor Tabi-Haller Jorden. My second name is Japanese, which means traveler or gypsy. I spent most of my life traveling and moving around, living and working in 9 different countries. I grew up in a household where Japanese was the spoken language, so I learned English as a second language, which was interesting, still working on my English. And I head up a global think tank based in Switzerland, and we are focused on the workplace of the future. So clearly we swim and drink disruption. I would say that probably the most fascinating dimension that we've seen is robotic intelligence. We will be having a robot join our team in 2 months. So we are actively involved in developing and leveraging artificial intelligence and robotics to really help evolve workplace thinking. The other dimension that we're very interested in is in education. So we are currently rolling out a program across Europe in 30 different schools for 8 to 10-year-olds on innovation. And it is remarkable to see these children absorb and process the implications of being more creative and innovative. And our argument is, and this is sponsored by 12 different companies, that by the time we reach university and graduate school education, it's almost too late. And what was ironic is, just as a test in one of the business schools that I teach, I took one of the exercises that we do with these 8 to 10-year-olds, and 30% of these adults couldn't do it. And the children got it immediately. So I am, on top of everything else, a chronic optimist, because I do think if we start changing the school system, we start looking at the public policy arena and so on, we will drive the kind of change that will create far more engaging and exciting workplaces. So that is
Okay,
that's
great.
sort of my...
And I think I'd like to loop back to both that whole topic of skill and education. Katrien, tell us your secret.
My secret. So I'm Katrien Goossens. I'm 100% Belgian, but I often get mistaken for an Irish lady because apparently I have an Irish lilt in my accent. So there you go. My secret, apart from that, which is not so secret, is that I love traveling. And as a child, I think that was already hidden deep down inside me. I was always exploring, always running away. Unfortunately for my parents, who always had to pick me up at police stations, etc., where I would sit very proudly and say, "Mummy, I'm sat in the, in the police car," and it was so exciting. So that's my guilty secret. When it comes to disruption, so I actually work, and I have the pleasure of having a lot of colleagues here, men and women, to work next door at a company called Euroclear Financial Services. And one of the big disruptions for us this year is actually that as of this year, we have a female CEO. Unfortunately, she couldn't be here today, But we're very excited about that because it's, me personally, I'll tell you something. Most people in the company, or I would say most women in the company, thought, we have a female CEO, so gender diversity, gender equality is not a topic anymore. You know, she'll immediately start talking for the women, and I'm also a woman. But actually, she's not doing that. She's very conscious of the fact that as a CEO, she's representing the company as a whole. She's representing the women and the men. And that's really what's important for us. It's about creating an inclusive environment where both men and women feel good. So I think that's a very important one. In terms of disruption, the kind of areas I'm most exposed to are, I also see a lot of potential in artificial intelligence and robotics. And I see that a bit more hopeful maybe than you, Chiara, in the sense that I see a lot of female talent. We're also supporting, and I know a lot of other companies are too, to get more girls studying STEM with organizations like Green Light for Girls, Coder Dojos, etc. I hope we get enough girls excited about these things so they get in on the game and get coding and get creating that future together with the white dudes in the States. So that's one thing. And the second thing I'm personally very passionate about is neuroscience. I think it's amazing in the last couple of years what research has shown us about our brain, how it works, how we see the world, how that impacts our decisions consciously and unconsciously. And I brought a book today, which Tabi knows, from Harvard Kennedy professor, Irish Bonet. It's called What Works? Gender Equality by Design. And this is something I'm very passionate about how you can embed gender equality in the design or the redesign of companies. So those for me are the two.
A really good reference and read. Great, thank you. Paul, tell us your hidden secret, and you've got an interesting view on disruption, so share that with us.
One of my secrets is that my parents got divorced when my mother was pregnant of me. So I was raised mainly by my mother and 3 older sisters. So I've been raised in a very feminine environment. Now I have 3 daughters and a boy. So I
So you're used to
women. My
women.
dog is a female. So, another secret is that I had never taken an actor class before going on stage with my one-man show. It was just by passion to share some ideas that I found useful in my life, and so I wanted to share with the public. Disrupting society, yes, I feel it. I don't have experience in the business world since I started an online company when I was 25, which stopped when I was 29, so it wasn't very long. But I have an image. Maybe can I talk about the image now, about the disrupting word?
Yeah.
Is it okay with you? The image I have for the disrupting word is that if you imagine that living is like a journey on a rafting river, we all know that rafting is quite dangerous. You agree? Because in the river there are rocks and the currents, and you can fall off and you can drown, and so it's pretty dangerous. And from all times, we all have the idea to bring more security in our lives. And we know a very easy way to bring more security in our lives, we've learned that from beavers, is to build a dam on a river. Why build a dam? Because we can swim on the lake. It's more easy. You're not drown. It's easier to learn our children to swim in the river, to have a nice journey in the river, in the lake. And so we build for 50 years now. We built a pretty good big dam. Job security, social security, unemployment, fares, everything that we, for the 30 Glorieuses, we say, we built a big dam, and everyone was very happy living in parcels. Of course, the parcels didn't have the same size. They were very nice parcels here for the rich, middle management, workers, but everyone had its place on the lake. Problem is that now, for the 40 years now, from the 70s, the dam has cracks. There's no job security anymore. the public deficits, we all know that there's lots of cracks in the dams. And there, with the cracks, we have two possibilities. First one is to try to stay in our parcels. And we know that there's no parcels, no places for everyone anymore. But we start, and some politicians and some extremes were talking about, some politician wants to restore the dam, to put some stranger outside, to make more space for the people we have present there. Socialists wants to take some space on the big parcels to share with others. It's a question of solidarity. It's pretty nice. Liberals say, no, struggle for lives is the market who decides, and people too weak. Sorry, but the liberty is for everyone to have its parcels. It's not very nice to live in an environment with fear. The water is there for 40 years. It's not, you see, there's no absence of values of life in the stagnant waters. And what I suggest now is that, in fact, the river still continues down the dam. And we now have to, instead of being stuck in the dam, we can choose or decide to go back and swim back in the river again. That's where we can find solidarity between us, because we don't have to be stuck in a parcel. That's where you can find other people. That's where life will bring you somewhere.
Okay, Paul, what I'd like to do is bring Tabi in on this, because I think you've got, you're a little bit the same view, is that we need to be embracing change. Yeah. There are a lot of people who view disruption as job losses, insecurity. We know there's been a spike in anxiety. Coaches and therapists are experiencing more people suffering from this. So share with us, what are the benefits for the organization, but the benefits for the individual?
Yeah, and I think even more fundamentally, I think you brought up a really interesting point. It depends on what our frame of reference is. So I hear the word disruption and I get excited. For other people, that's horrifying. So I think at the end of the day, I often think one of our biggest challenges is how can we move from a judging mode to a learning mode, and sort of engage with these phenomena from a sense of curiosity and desire to learn, as opposed to negating absolutely. Because I do, to your earlier point, Dorothy, there are facets of all of this that are good news and bad news.
Yeah,
I think we have to try to think as holistically as possible. And I think the minute we get formulaic or judgmental, we're in trouble. Because I think, one of the things that, one of the aha moments in one piece of research that we did, we surveyed 47 companies globally, and we are very interested in the assessment of employees on the experience of inclusion. So these are companies that have hundreds of different policies, practices. We've heard all about it. The number one finding from this study was that the success that these individuals identified, what made the most difference to you in the experience of inclusion in your work environment. So these are companies experiencing disruption, managing disruption, et cetera. They said being treated as an individual, not as a demographic group. And this is what I often think we need to be extremely careful about in our language, is we tend to deal with monolithic cultures like women versus men, millennials versus baby boomers, et cetera. And the language is constraining our ability to engage far more open-mindedly and creatively. So we have somebody on our team who is 92 years old. He is a top performer. He's working 80%, and we hired him because of his ability. We didn't hire him because of or in spite of being 92. That's a different kind of mindset. And I do think we almost have to create a new vocabulary, a new frame of reference, and a new compass to deal with these issues. Because I think as long as we sort of put our feet into the status quo and evaluate these trends, by definition, it's going to be a losing proposition. I think we have to say disruption is going to be constant. It's not going to be stability versus disruption. It is perpetual, chronic disruption. And I think we have to really sort of reframe the challenge as more of an opportunity. How can I meaningfully engage with this that brings meaning to my life, as opposed to being a victim of things for which I have no control. And I do think that's a fundamental mindset shift.
No, I think that I agree. Michèle, how do you, what do you do in your organisation as the leader of a company? How do you embrace disruption?
We are making a lot of things with the management team and conducting this even with the employees. And I'm absolutely with you. And also I like your picture, Paul, because it's telling us that we should go for a new word. And navigating means that we will make errors, but we should admit that we will make errors. And we should even enjoy this new playful ground, because we will play again like kids. We will discover new territory. We will be together, and that's the moment now with the young generation to collaborate, co-working. This co-flexibility is needed in this new world. We see it perfectly with the new people we are employing, and we have at about 50 different new people joining the company within 3 months now, which is huge. So this is a growing company, but they are all asking that. Is it funny to work with you? Can we have some fun? The fun will come from the fact that we will go for new words, navigating this disruption. And we have to live with that and not fearing that the past was so good. It was not so good. The future will be good. So that's a way to conduct the company with the management team, with the value, with the vision we've got, and inspiring the people for this new world.
Okay, Katrien wants to chip in now.
I fully agree with you, Michèle, on we need a new vocabulary. The old vocabulary doesn't work anymore in this day and age. And building on what you said, Tabi, I don't think it's a surprise. The topics are usually not brought together, but for me it's not a surprise that something like mindfulness is very popular these days in a lot of companies. It's also something we're offering at Euroclear, not necessarily in the context of gender equality as such, but the whole concept of mindfulness is about being in the present, being able to, see in yourself what's happening, not going into automatic pilot, and not judging what is happening around you. I think that's why so many people are drawn to that, because it's one of the key attitudes we need if we want to get better at treating people exactly like you say, Tabi, as individuals, and at really creating that inclusive company climate that we all want to have.
Chiara, you're nodding your head like crazy
Yes,
there.
I completely agree. I couldn't agree more. I think the rules of the game have been set at a time where a lot of people were not in the game, at a time where women were not involved, but also other minorities of all kinds. And now we're all in this game, and we shouldn't struggle to work with the rules that are there. We should make new rules. We should just change the game completely. Things like working time is already changing, paternity and maternity leave, all those sort of structures that have been put in place in a mostly male-dominated environment years ago can be changed completely. And companies like Google try to do it. They also have the luxury, I guess, and resources to spend a lot of time on these issues. But I think for all of us, it's a challenge to just reject what's already there and think about, okay, all of this is now disrupted. How do we deal with it? Is the old model working? Probably not anymore. Let's come up with something new. Let's just challenge everything that we think is true just because it's always been there. And let's come up with some different solutions.
Paul, you sound as though you want to chip in.
There's some pioneers in the field in terms of the organization of societies. Google is one of them. But I want to share with you an experience. There's one called Favi. I don't know if someone have heard of this company. 500 people in France. They're doing pieces in copper for gearboxes. And so they got a lot of concurrence in China, and they're the only one in Europe, in France. And Jean-François Zobris, the president, 15 years ago, took the company, who was pretty in bad shape. And what he did is said, okay, I want to change completely the organization. He said, now the current management is based on 3 principles. Co-workers and blue collars and employees are lazy because we need to check their time all the time, and they want to work as less as possible. The second principle was people are thieves and people are stupid because we need to tell them everything what they need to do. We need to control them all the time. And he said, I don't want that. For me, my perception is that people are honest, they are motivated, and they are intelligent. And so one of the first measure he took was to get rid of the clocks. And he noticed after a week that the productivity had increased by 20%, and it couldn't see why it was so obvious. And the coworker said, "Yeah, because we were working less than we could because we knew that the management would at a point increase the productivity level. So we always were working less than we could have done." And so there's lots of organization that have changed. They took responsibility, all the workers. And you should read. There's a book called L'Entreprise Libérée. And he explains some pioneering enterprises who has changed completely their organization. It works very well. So I encourage you to read this book.
I'm going to put my devil's advocate hat on now. So we're all talking about vision and planning and everything going great. But if you're an employee and you feel that your job is under threat, you're struggling with managing work life, you're doing all of these things, and you feel stressed, like almost the whole room here feels it. What's the how? How are we going to do this? And what I thought was interesting, Tabi, when we talked before when we were chatting a couple of weeks ago, you said the rational case for gender balance had not been framed correctly. So what should we be doing differently to make all of these lovely people less stressed?
Yeah, I mean, the irony, obviously, looking at the gender lens, is that we have, since 1983, published 103 business case studies, and yet the numbers aren't changing.
Exactly.
So clearly there is a gap between intention and impact. And so I do think there's a big chasm out there. And I remember speaking to a CEO about this, and I liked what he said. He said, Tabi, we're great on the numeracy, we're lousy on the narrative. So, one of the mandates that he introduced in his companies, he said, in any case that we are discussing gender diversity, I want somebody to be able to be articulate without a PowerPoint presentation. And I just thought that was a very simple invitation for people to say, very compellingly, why are we doing this? And he said the other thing that we have to be very careful about is taking at face value all of these assertions. So when we say that diversity leads to innovation, show me how. I want to understand that. So the middle management population is often left feeling like deer in the headlights because there are all of these assertions, but we haven't actually made them very granular or meaningful.
Yeah.
And I often think, rather than speaking about a business case, let's talk about the personal case. Let's show what skin in the game we have about these issues. So, I do think, in answer to your first question, however, I was presenting to, I guess it was about 63 companies in Zurich about these new trends. And I thought, let me just ask the audience a question. And these are all representing, large Fortune 500, 1,000 companies globally. I said, how many of you believe right now that the value proposition you have to offer can compete with the perceived opportunities of the entrepreneurial sector? And nobody raised their hand. That's the worry. Because I do think when you look at the number of businesses, women are starting businesses at 4 times the rate of men right now globally. And I think that's a representation of women voting with their feet.
Yeah.
They are growing extremely frustrated with the lack of momentum and visibility. So I think there is, a turning point and a crossroads now where more and more women are saying, I want to have impact in my life. And if I cannot see the kind of impact in this corporate environment, I have only myself to blame because I have to pick myself up by the bootstraps and I have to look for an opportunity. And the good news is the companies that are doing a good job with this are out there. They are sharing their numbers. They are sharing their accountability. I work as a strategic advisor for the EDGE. I don't know how many of you have heard of this, but it is the global business standard for gender equality, which was launched at the World Economic Forum in 2011. There are 150 companies globally that have either been certified or are on that journey. That is actually proof points that we are actually moving that needle. But I do think it takes the kind of conviction, the bold leadership, and the exacting execution that will drive this change. But I do think we have to take responsibility for those outcomes. And sometimes it does mean leaving an employer.
Katrien.
And I want to direct on that. Yes, the business case is there, and there are plenty of studies, and they're very good when you want to start, putting this topic on the table with senior management. But at the end of the day, when it comes to execution, we all know that there's a difference between our intentions and what we actually do. We all think, or we all believe, that smoking is not good for our health, yet still a lot of people are smoking. We know that eating 5 more cakes will make us fatter, yet we still do it, even if we are supposed to be on a diet. So there is a difference between intention and what we actually do, which is why I'm so passionate about this topic of unconscious bias, because for me, the way to move forward is not in putting all of our efforts into trying to change each one individual in a company. It's just taking too much time. And I don't see that progressing a lot. So I think, yes, awareness is important around the business case, around what something like unconscious bias is. But at the end of the day, and that's where, well, I come from HR, so it's normal I should say that, I believe HR should play a big role in making sure that we design and redesign our corporate people processes, so the hiring, promotion rounds, talent reviews, etc., taking into account instances that could trigger unconscious biases and removing those instances from the process, so we don't actually have to go to, trying to unbias people, because you can't. Coming back to what you said, Dorothy, about unconscious bias, actually I believe it's even more of an issue than we sometimes realize, because when I talk to women about it, they say, yes, a lot of men have unconscious bias. Like,
A lot of women have unconscious
so
bias
do we.
too.
Because each one of us gets 11 million bits of information at this very second. 11 million bits. And guess what? There's only 40 bits of information that we can consciously process. All the rest is unconsciously processed somewhere deep in our brain, meaning our brain takes shortcuts. It puts things in the boxes that we've created through our cultural background, our education, what we see on television. And that's why, unless we have more things in our processes or in our visuals, even, I really liked your visual of the it was a female dentist, wasn't it, on the screen, to change. That's going to take a long time, but to make it more normal, that we don't automatically think of a nurse anymore as being a woman, or that when we think of leader, we automatically associate that with a man. But I do believe in changing processes, because the whole danger of, or the whole nature of unconscious bias is that they are unconscious and that each one of us has them. So the only way for me to tackle that is to work at it at a systemic level and really work at company processes and structures.
Paul, I mean, this is up your street a little bit now. And we talked about gender bilingualism and the gender characteristics are not binary, they're on a spectrum. So talk us through that and how it's good for us to try and achieve that balance and that tolerance, really. That you're not a bitch if you're a pushy woman or an assertive woman, and you're not a wimp if you're a guy who wants to look after the kids. So teach us how we can get out of that framework.
We try to understand another person's language and to try to respect and learn to respect and the beauty also of the language, not to put it down. And it's so, you see, for example, what I see from the bilingual is like, it was stupid, but when my wife was in the morning, she would get up, go in front of her dresser, open her dresser, and say, "I have nothing to wear." Before that, I said, "But why do you lie to me? It's stupid. Why do you say that? Your drawer is full of dresses." And now what I understood is that when she tells me I have nothing to wear, she's not telling me there's no dress in my drawer. She's just saying I don't know what I wanted to wear. And when you start to translate those languages, and you try to to know what is behind what she says, and you start to respect what it is, you can really find richness in the other way to act. And in the business, it's very important to understand those ways, and for women not to to say, as you said, the women had to work and to be like men in order to be respected. And I think with the disrupting society we're here, is that organization now must change in order for women to be more respected as they are, and not to be obliged to be like men to be respected. And I'm completely in line with you when you say we need to change the organization. We need the maternity leaves and all those measures as made for men by men to accept women in their organizations. But we need to make other organizations for men and women to be respected equally in the workplace.
Chiara, give us a millennial viewpoint on this. Is it different to the others? I mean, do you see things through a different lens?
I don't. I think I agree with all I just heard. I think unconscious bias in particular is really interesting because it is something that we all just do. And I agree that structure helps sort of getting away from it. What we tried to do a lot at Google is also making unconscious bias conscious, or at least as conscious as possible. So all of us go through first week at Google an unconscious bias training, and what it does, it doesn't take away the bias from your head, but it makes you aware that you might be biased. So when you look at things, you start thinking, all right, I think this could be a good way to do it, but let's maybe take a step back and check with someone else, or, you know, I expect this from this person, but I shouldn't just give it for granted because I am aware that I'm a biased person. And once those things are just taken out and made open, it's much easier to deal with it. Everybody deals with it. What I find is that the more we talk about differences, and again, individual differences, not sort of young versus old, or, you know, women versus men, the better it is. We, for example, we just sat down with my team at Google. We discussed team rules, so rules for how we work together, as some people raised the fact that they were struggling with work-life balance and stress. So we sat down and we discussed, okay, should we agree on 6, 7, 8 rules that we all follow to make sure that everybody's happy? And one of the rules was we shall not send emails after 6 p.m., which is when our workday is over, which was something sort of done thinking about people with children, of course, and taking care of older family members, etc. But then the younger part of the group and the childless part of the group and the older with grown-up kids who are not at home part of the group said, actually, we'd rather be able to send emails later in the day so that during the day we can maybe leave the office for an hour or two to do something. Single people were like, I don't have a partner, so I need to go to the dentist, I need to buy my groceries, I need to do my laundry, and sometimes I have to do it during the day. So, you know, it's just, for me, it's really a matter of communicating and bringing this all out in the open, realizing that we all have different needs and different thoughts, and it's not necessarily age related, but just depends on the situation you're at that point in that moment. The more you talk about it, the better it is. It makes some people uncomfortable, which sometimes is funny. Most times it's not, but it's just something that the more you talk about, the easier it is to at least maybe not solve it, but address it in some way or another.
Michèle, I can see that you look as though you've got something to say on this. So.
We saw with Quintiles IMS that when we were starting with the part-time, the flex time and so on, so we have had the same for the men or for women coming to this program. So it was not a question of being female or male, it was a question to see how would be my life if I would change something to have less stress. And I think that the stress is coming from women and coming from the men, as you said already. And we've got a lot of hidden message. And when I'm telling I don't have anything to wear, it's a hidden message for sure. So we have as employer, and this is what we are trying to do with our company, to understand those hidden message from young generation, from men, female, and the other one. And then by being a bit more self-confident, I would like to say to each of you here in the room that by being a bit a slightly more self-confidence, you will help yourself to have less stress. Another things, and that's the HR within our company, is listening to the people, is helping also to have less stress. Based on that, we are moving with the management team, we are moving the rules, and we are changing the rules, how we are communicating, but even how we want to drive the business and to make the growth. So we are making the changes based on what the people are daring to say to the HR. So that's why the human resource, for my point of view, our point of view at Quintiles AMS, is a new way to be really productive by listening to the people. And the last thing I would like to say is that by putting in place some time behind all the things which are making you stressful, you will probably help yourself to have less stress, staying focused of 1 of 2 of 3 things, but not on 10 things. And don't try to be perfect. Perfection doesn't exist, and nobody reach this perfection. So stay focused, speak to your HR, and with the HR and the community, the company has to change the rules.
Okay, excellent. Paul, you're dying to say something.
No, it was.
Okay. Oh, you just pointed out it was 10 minutes. I thought you wanted to say.
No,
Well,
but that's
yeah,
one thing I could say is that one of the differences that we say in the feminine and masculine language is that the masculine language doesn't like to talk about its problems. For a man, talking about a problem is showing his incompetency of resolving it. So he doesn't want to. He doesn't want to talk about it. The female language likes and wants to share his problem, because by sharing the problem, it helps to go and try to find solutions by talking about it. And in the organization, we see that the feminine way to work is growing, because now we see that how important it is now to talk about problems. We don't want in organizations to have people who try to solve the problem by themselves. And for men, for some men, it can be very difficult to start to work in an environment where now we are forced or convinced to talk about problems. So we see that there's lots of changes now in the organizations where feminine parts of language are more and more taken into consideration. It's a very good point.
I want to put something in here. This is research from Axiom and Jump, that an increasing number of gentlemen opting for flex. But they're not actually helping. That's a very female-coded word. They're not actually participating in domestic work. And how are we going to get that to change? I mean, let's do a poll here. How many of you well, first of all, let's do it across everybody. How many people have flex? Okay. How many of the gentlemen have flex? Flexi time.
Flexi time.
Flexible hours. Floating hours. Yeah. Okay, you do. Okay. And what is your participation at home? Is it 50%? Who's doing? Oh, come on, you are. You know. Okay. Okay. Good for you. I like that term, family management.
That's why he is here.
I've got just one last question before we open up generally to the floor. One of the major things we're talking about, and for Google as well, and for Quintiles, is getting women out of what I call pink skill silos and soft subjects, and getting them into STEM. How are we going to do that? I'm very practical, as you can tell. How are we going to do that? We talk about we must do it, but what are we going to do differently? Tabi.
Well, I'll speak to the academic sector first, which is really interesting. So Carnegie Mellon was very interested, for example, in getting more women computer programmers. And one of the things that they did is they altered the pedagogy of the classroom to emphasize more storytelling and putting the programming challenges into a context. There were a number of other modifications that they made, but within a 3 to 4 year period, I believe, they increased the number of computer programming majors among women by 34%. We've been doing some really interesting work with single-sex schools. Extremely high percentage of women graduating from single-sex schools are STEM majors. So for example, in the US, Bryn Mawr is just behind MIT in terms of the number of women graduates in engineering, math, science, technology. So again, I think there's some low-hanging fruit out there that I think we need to grab. And I do think there are these pockets of success, but I think to some extent there's a lot of mythology out there. I remember we were involved in an oil and gas company, and they were bemoaning the fact that they didn't have enough women engineers. So they went and did research, and they actually went into the families, and what they discovered is that the young women were keen to be petroleum engineers, but their parents said, oh, that's a messy business, go into law, go into medicine. And I thought that was fascinating. So I think we're dealing with a lot of socialization
And
in
cultural
terms of schools,
issues, yeah.
culture, family, and so on. So frankly, the solution then has to address those other points, because you can't simply tell girls, major in this. You really have to look at these challenges systemically to ensure that where are they getting the messages? What are the role models? We haven't had a chance today to talk about role models, but I do believe that is so vital, because part of what we need to challenge is the monolithic definition of being a man versus a woman. So, what we fail to recognize is there's more diversity among women than between men and women, but we don't acknowledge that.
Well, that's what I was talking about earlier, the spectrum.
The spectrum.
So, spectrum of...
I don't necessarily believe in the adage, if you haven't seen it, you can't be it. But I do believe when I speak to young women who aspire to taking on unusual roles, let's say, they have always said, oh, I have this role model.
Yeah.
And I saw, there's a possibility there, because I can see in their life choices things that I can connect to. And I often hear from senior level women executives and companies saying, Tabi, we've got lots of leaders, but we don't have any role models. And I think there is a distinction in many people's minds. A role model is somebody who inspires you for the impossible, or seemingly impossible. That you will stretch your own ambitions because you think, okay, there's an example where I don't have to follow the cookie cutter model and so on. So I think that can be a huge catalyst to actually expand our imaginations in that sense of the possible.
Okay, great. Well, it's now time to open up the questions to the floor. So you've got this incredibly experienced and talented panel here. So what questions do you want to pose? Anybody? Yeah, excellent.
But my question comes from the fact that we're talking about, obviously, gender equality, but to me, a lot has to do with embracing diversity, whatever it comes from. The impression that I have, though, is that, and if we're looking close to Europe, I believe that we measure a lot of diversity and we report statistics back, but we do very little with it. For example, there's this PISA report, right, on education systems. It's published regularly. And I remember reading it last year. I think it was on mathematics. And Belgium, just to name the country we're in now, was coming second in the world, or third. I don't remember exactly. But there was a small asterisk. And then when you're looking at the asterisk at the bottom of the page, it was saying Flanders. So then I was saying, we do have good examples that are out there for us to look at, but we are not even capable of embracing it and using it within the same geography. So what can we do with that? Because that one will help a lot to me if we can do something with diversity and the fact that we do something different because somebody is doing it better.
Okay, who wants to, Michèle, is that you or Tabi?
Sure. Sorry. Yeah. No, I think your comment is so appropriate. I was smiling to myself because I remember early days when I started getting involved in social justice and diversity and so on. I remember walking down a hallway in a company, and the senior level male manager stopped me. He said, Tabi, I don't know why we're dealing with this women's issues. I see women in the hallway all the time. So, the numerical, so what do we do with it? And I think you've really hit the nail on the head, because at the end of the day, one of the sort of the missing links in a lot of the research is people somehow, I think, assume that diversity in and of itself will lead to those business outcomes. That is absolutely not the case. If anything, it can cause a lot of problems in terms of mismanagement, conflict, negotiation issues, and so on. So the issue is, how do you leverage that diversity to realize the business outcomes? And to do that, we are increasingly acknowledging that management is a social competency. And I think the shift, we talked about relationships, is beginning to shift now, where people can no longer rely on transactional, quantitative skills to move up. You need those relational skills. And I remember CEO recently telling me, Tabi, we hire attitudes, we train skills. It's the attitudes that are actually going to bring the engagement with this diversity, because at the end of the day, if it's nothing more than a box-checking exercise, on paper you may look great, but the lived experience of that culture could be disastrous. So that's one of the aha moments often for companies that have lots of programs and policies. By and large, the numbers don't look don't look bad, but the qualitative survey data suggests we have a real problem. So I do think that's an extremely important issue. And boy, I often say, the Gallup organization, should issue their statistics with airbags and seatbelts, because when you start reading these statistics, so last year, only 13% of the global workforce is engaged. Only 11% of the global workforce trusts their managers. 2/3 of men and women do not believe a meritocracy exists. And for the first time in 15 years, leisure was ranked more importantly than work in importance. So if you look at that confluence of data, we've got a potent cocktail out there that we have to look at. But that's exactly the point. Numbers don't tell the whole story by any means. If anything, we have to be careful, because they can be a smokescreen of a significant lack of progress in terms of the quality of that culture. We really need to look at workplace cultures. It's not simply the programs and policies.
I so agree with what you're saying, Tabi, which is why I think, in any company working on diversity alone, diversity is the fact, and you can further increase it, and you can increase representation of different groups of people. But at the end of the day, it's your individual experience in the company. Do I feel listened to? Do I feel like I have a place here? Do I have a voice? Verna Myers in the US once said, diversity is being invited to the party, inclusion is being asked to dance. And that's often it. You can be there numerically, but do you really feel that you belong? Which is why I'm really happy also to see in more and more companies that the focus is much more on inclusion, on the cultural piece and on the experience of people, rather than just putting people in boxes and measuring.
I want to I'll chip in quickly on that. HR is made up of 77% women, right? So one of the things that, given that they're managing the talent pipeline, I just wonder what more could they do to make it work differently. Michèle, do you have any thoughts on that, and then Katrien?
Yes, certainly, but even come back to what we said just before. So I'm really a fan of job crafting. So indeed, we will never be equal. We will be complementary, and so because we are all different, coming from different horizons. Not only gender, by the way, but even the age and so on. So we are all different, which is the beauty of the story. But each of the company and the society even needs this diversity. And now the question is how to make it functioning on the best way. So I'm a strong believer in complementarity. And by saying that, I think that when we've got a project, the purpose is not to see who has this seat. Is it the CEO? Is it the CFO? Or no, it's who would be the best person to make it happen. And this is what we call job crafting. So just help the people to be stretched in their own function. For sure, they've got basic and they've got some expertise. But how can we stretch the people to make a project together based on this diversity or complementarity? People are coming with new talents. We are discovering the people. We are also working on mentorship by doing that, female or male or young or old people. But this is really helping this co-creation for the future and for the growing business.
Okay.
And on your point, Dorothy, what can HR do?
Well, or maybe what can they do differently, or what do they
I think
need
it
to
starts
change?
from a common misconception that HR is responsible for the culture, is responsible for how people are being managed, And at the end of the day, it's the individual relationship. People's experience of a company is not just HR, that the processes, the people they know in HR, it's their relationship with their direct manager, it's the relationship within their team. Do they feel part? Do they value? So there's that. Having said that, I think what HR can do and should do differently is we are owners or guardians of the corporate processes. So there, I do think we have a responsibility to play in terms of keeping up with research on, for example, what is unconscious bias, making sure there's awareness about these things, but also, and that's where I like the word playfulness was mentioned, and experimenting. It's experimenting, trying to do things differently in our processes. For example, hiring. You have these great apps right now, like Textio, etc., that can immediately tell you if a job ad you've written has gendered language in it, which might, deter women from applying for certain jobs, or men, or vice versa. So I think that's the role HR should play, being an enabler in giving intelligence to the business about these things, and then being open to experimenting with the processes.
We've just got a few more minutes left. Question from the floor. You got it?
Yes, I'd like to ask the panel. Yes, my name is Charlotte. I'm from Euroclear. Same as Katrien. I'd like to ask the panel, why do you think there are so few men here? So for me, men absolutely must be a part of this conversation. And if you're talking about, for example, sharing responsibilities at home, men have to be part of the conversation. They have to feel comfortable being part of it. I'm lucky I have a husband who stays at home and does all the work. But I think it's a really interesting question when I look around me and I see some men here, but very, very few. And I just wonder, why does the panel think that might be?
Paul, do you want to address that?
Yes,
That's a bit
men are scared first. They might be scared a little bit. One thing I think is from one reason I can see that comes from the history of feminism that Dorothy shared with us. The first movement was to be against men. So we see it like you want to fight. So some feminists want to fight against it. They don't want to us to be part of it. We were a bit scared of these feminist movements against men. I think in Jump, and now we see that we want to be a collaboration between men and women. So there's more and more men, because I was here 4 or 5 years ago in Jump, and there was less men. So it's a progress. I think there's more and more men coming into this business, and also it's Isabella and all his team work is to really explain that it's not a feminist movement. It's really ways to more and more collaborate in the workplace together, and so they'll come. In my shows, they're about 50% men. So we want to have good relationship in general. We don't talk about it. We talk less about it, but we really want. We would enjoy also to have a good relationship with you at home, of course, but also in the workplace.
Good, thanks.
I don't know if I can.
I would like to comment on that. Sorry, I'm here. I'm Isabella.
Hi, Isabella. Come.
No, just it's a bit easy to say that it's about feminist, or at least as feminism is viewed and considered by men. Yes, for sure, men feel threatened. It's the first time in the history that they do have to face so much of a competition, because we do represent 60% of the young graduates. So it's really okay. But it's really, in order to empower women, in order to have gender equality, you have to disempower men somehow. And we need to face that. This is most probably why we have so few men here. Even when and Euroclear, Deleuze, and many partners that I do have know how much it is difficult. Even if they do a lot of efforts to attract men at the Jump Forum, they know how much it is difficult, because they don't feel it is about them. but they have a gender too. They are part of the game. And it's very much complicated. We have a survey called Do Men Want Equality in the Workplace? And even if 3/4 of the men that were surveyed think that they have a benefit in better gender equality, only 1 out of 5 is an active supporter of gender equality. And you're right. And even the one that were present to the first panel, to the first session, know that it's exactly the same questions all the time. My goodness, men should be here. Men should be part of it. Men should be really committed. And so it's not, Paul, it's not really about us. It's about you guys.
Okay.
But you said we're scared.
Oh, we've got loads of people want to chip in now.
Men who are scared. Yeah, you told us. We agree.
Okay.
Hello, sorry, I liked your enthusiasm, but I don't exactly agree. I think that in general, it's also a big problem of women, and I missed this in the discussion, that solidarity is just a lack that we have, and it would actually help us go forward much faster. I feel much more competition between women than I ever feel it with my male colleagues. And I also feel a lot more envy from women if I succeed in something than from my male colleagues. And I believe, like in everything, if you're alone, you cannot succeed as easy as if you are in a group. Accepting that your male or your female colleagues just advance like another male colleague, and you help instead of being competitive, etc. And I think this is one of the issues that it's not against women. It should be much more. The focus should be with women, not against men. So
yeah, a lot of women report either jealousy or a lack of support, sadly. Okay. Yes?
It's just a question and perhaps also a suggestion to open the jump much more to men, but how many men are part of the organization? And also, I really like that pink color, but it's also all that makes it more targeted to women, I think. I'm just thinking, I come from the last company, and today we have 4 guys coming. 3 years ago, there was no guy. I really don't think there was that much communication to bring guys. I mean, we just received an email, and there was a limited number of places to come, so all women that came really struggled to get a place. So I was really surprised to see guys coming. But I think it's also, just you get that newsletter, it's in pink, it's for Jump, it's about the right for women. So it's perhaps, just small details that also make that much more targeted for guys, for women.
Yeah. Do you want to answer that, Isabella?
What do we want? It's not that all girls and boys do like pink. Pink is the symbol of femininity. And until pink cannot be considered as a business color, as blue, gray, or black, that means that the workplace will not be inclusive. The workplace needs to embody all the colors. And this is only a signal that is sent. Yes, of course, it's complicated, but I won't do it in black or in blue just in order to have more men, because men need to go forward also. They need to understand. They need to really, to play the game.
I've got a piece of trivia, actually. Men who wear pink shirts earn more than men who don't. So, wear your pink shirts, guys. Yes.
Hello, Isabella. I would like also to react on what you said. You said that giving more power to women is taking power from men. I am not convinced about that. It's just, I think, giving the same chances to the people who want to take the power, to take it. And maybe in the Jump Forum, maybe we should also put the accent on, for men, what's in it for me. Like, for instance, giving more air to men and more opportunities to take care of their children also. I have the chance to have a husband who has taken a parental leave And when I talk about it to my friends, to other boys, and say, why don't you do it? Well, I would never dare to ask that to my boss in my company. And my husband, he was the only one in a company of 3,000 people, the only man taking a parental leave. So maybe we should put more accent on that also to have more men here, because they also have advantage in it.
I'm going to inject again here to be a bit of a contrarian. Last year, I did a workshop specifically for men on communication, or gender differences in communication, specifically for men. And I can't remember the numbers, but it was 80% women, I'd say. Yeah, was that about right? Yeah. So I think it's about persuading men, or men feeling comfortable in this sort of environment, and understanding that I prefer to use the word synergy, that there is synergy when men and women work together to produce concrete and productive results that are going to, as I said in my opening notes, that men are stressed by the system as it exists now as much as women are, and we said that when everybody here is stressed. So I think it's important to find a way forward that works for everybody.
And I was involved in a research study a couple of years ago that was very poignant, and we basically went after men who had taken unusual steps, at least based on gender-based norms. So these are men that exceeded the allotment for parental leave, were basically very involved in family life, et cetera, et cetera. And one of the things that really stuck in my mind was an interview with a young man who had taken not only what was allotted to him as parental leave, but requested 2 additional unpaid months. And he said, Tabby, when I got back to the office, the first thing that a male colleague said to me is, Peter, when are you going to stop breastfeeding? So I do think this is an important issue, because I think it goes back to the issue of being an individual versus representing a demographic group. He said, I wanted to do this. This was important to me. I'm not telling other men they need to do this, but this decision was right for me. But he said, I got so much negative press from my male colleagues.
Yeah.
So I think it's really important for us to stress the fact that these gender-based stereotypes move in all directions, and we have to, I think, open up. And then I want to leave on a funny note, in terms of just sort of doing what you think is right, even when you're wrong. I was late for a meeting, and I had to use what I thought was the ladies' room. So I went barging in and came out, and there's a man standing there. And of course, I must have looked as if I knew what I was doing, because he said, oh my word, I am so sorry. So we went running across the hall into the ladies' room, at which point there was a lady, and she said, excuse me? And then, of course, he was totally confused. But I just use that as an example in terms of sort of allowing ourselves to be who we are, with a sense of playfulness and perspective and humor, because there is no such thing as perfection. But I do think the other issue that we've touched on today that I think is a very significant dimension of several of your questions is language. I think we hear the word gender, we think women.
Yeah.
We don't think men and women. So again, we go into this default setting, and we cut off the conversation. So again, another perspective.
There's, I think we're running out of time. I mean, I think we could stay here all afternoon, truthfully. But apparently there is a lady there who's very keen to say, you're out of my line of vision, so maybe stand up.
Yeah.
Stand up on your... Hi. Okay.
I just have a question, because you attracted my mind about bias. I was like, okay, so we think about human beings and non-human beings now. It's interesting. And I was thinking about how AI does management. How a non-human person can, and if those person exist now, which is new to me, you introduced me the information, it's very interesting. And what's the main difference? Because when I was a child, I was thinking, oh, it could be interesting to be a non-hormonal person. So maybe an artificial one has that kind of reality. So what's the difference between a human being, whatever gender, and a non-human being in terms of management?
So specifically, the question is?
I thought about Chiara, about Tabi, and maybe too about Katrien, because you've been thinking a lot about neural information and things like that.
Okay.
So I'm not sure about how you would manage a robot, but
how would a robot manage humans? That
so
was my question.
The
maybe
thing
it's not clear. I'm sorry.
I'm already going forward. So the thing is that however smart, however intelligent a machine is, it's programmed and it's learned from people. So whatever machine is managing people, it will have picked up bias from reality, because the way machine learning works is a piece of machine looks at a million, a billion examples, trillion examples of something and recognizes patterns. So if those patterns are biased, the machine will be biased as well. So the question that scientists are asking now is, how do we correct that bias? Who corrects it? How do we make sure that the machine delivers a result that is different than the one that we see in reality? So you would still have to be very careful about who's behind that machine, that technology, and I don't think that we're in a place where a machine would ever be able to be unbiased enough that we could trust it to manage anything. So for the way I see it is, performing a certain very specific number of tasks, freeing up time for humans to hopefully do management better. That might be one of the perks of having machines do our job.
Okay, I think we all need to get some lunch, because otherwise you'll starve to death. I want to join me in thanking our panel. I think they've been absolutely great. Really interesting discussion. And thank you, because you've been great too. So at 2:00, Bill Proudman and Elizabeth Keelan are going to